So if you want to take it away, go for it.
Great. Hey everyone, my name is Daniel Longest, and today I'm just going to talk to you a bit about making music videos for a cappella. So I am in in the co-ed a cappella group Faux Pas from University of Maryland. I am the bass and I do PR there, and I recently made one of Go Maryland. I recently made a music video that I'm going to show you in a bit. But first, I'm going to share my screen and sort of go through some basic concepts that are important to know when planning your music video. So, share screen. There we go. All right, no. There we go. All right, so in preparing for a music video, style is very important. Considering, hold on, can I run there? All right, so it's important to consider the visuals of your video. The first step is to consider what you wear in your video. If everyone looks together and coordinated, the overall video will be more cohesive. Color and formalists are the two simplest, and yet they're some of the most important things to consider when planning your outfits. So try to decide on an overall color scheme beforehand for the overall video to match the whole video to, and then plan your outfits around that. For our video Into You, we chose purple and white. They the colors don't of everyone's outfits don't have to match exactly, but it looks more coordinated than if they were all different colors. So here, I'm going to show you real quick some of the part of the Into You video. So you can see everyone's outfits are slightly different, but they match overall for the color scheme. The men, all the outfits are semi-formal, but the men are wearing button-ups and t-shirts, the same color, and the women are wearing nice shirts and dresses. And as I mentioned, the overall color of the video is important, not just for outfits, but for the background as well. We chose a plain white background to match the white and purple color scheme, though of course you can edit it to not have a background at all. So next thing to consider is whether to use horizontal or vertical video. As you just saw in Into You, we used vertical, but many videos, especially simple grid videos, use horizontal. Excuse me. This is a perfect example of a horizontal video, and it's important to consider how you frame the video. Putting yourself in the center of the frame is the easiest way to have everything be symmetrical and looking good. And as you can see, he left a lot of room to the sides. If I wanted to make the video smaller or larger, he left room above his head for the same thing. Cropping video is an important thing to consider because not everyone will have the exact same size. Not everyone will have the exact same size video, but trying to make it consistent and similar helps with the editing process later. So next is lighting. Lighting is very important for everything just looking nice. Here is an example of two different takes from the Into You video. In this one, he has the light behind him and he has his computer screen in front of him. You can see the white light from his computer screen, and the light behind him has totally washed out the entire video and makes it all look flat and sort of strange, and the light puts a shadow on his face. In this take, the light is in front of him. Everything looks nice and clean. You have a bit of a shadow on his face, but it all looks nice and fancy. So now that we have all that set up, you have to consider how you're going to shoot your video. If you want a nice professional looking video, usually you'll want to do lip syncing. Here we have a video examples from another music video that I did. We did this live, so we recorded it. We recorded ourselves and then mixed the sound that we recorded while we were singing. Everyone wore earbuds, and while it's sort of unobtrusive, it is still pretty plain to see when you're watching the video. Whereas the interview video, you saw no one had any headphones, no one was doing anything. We recorded everything beforehand and lip synced along to our take of the recording. So now that we've got all that, we've considered everything we're preparing, I'm going to run through a little bit of a demo for setting up a very simple edit of a video. So stop sharing. Lots of moving parts here, so bear with me. So here we have Premiere Pro. I'm using Premiere Pro because I get free through my school. I got very lucky with that. They do have student discounts, but it can be pretty expensive. There are lots of alternatives for video editing, but this is what I do all my editing on. You can use Final Cut Pro. There's all sorts of free options online. A lot of the same concepts apply. So I'm going to be using this. I encourage you to check out other options. If this isn't in your budget, it's definitely not for everyone. So what I've done here is I've taken all my files and I've moved them into the assembly tab. This has all of the files together over here next to our timeline over here. And so I had everyone do 2 takes of their video. And so usually the second take is best. I'm going to move everyone's video into the timeline. And so this timeline is where you're going to be doing all of your editing of the video. So there's me. So we have everyone's video. And then, so as you can see, everyone did their video horizontally except for the soloist. That was a choice that we made stylistically for this video, but generally, especially if you have more than one soloist, it's best to keep everything, like I mentioned, decide on whether you want it to be horizontal or vertical. Keep everything sort of cohesive and coordinated. So now that we have all of our videos uploaded into the timeline, we're going to go over to the effects tab, which is what we're going to be using the most. You can also do this in the other tabs. The timeline still shows up at the bottom, but effects is where we're going to be using what we're going to be using the most to sort of organize everything. And so to make a grid video, what we're going to be doing is having, like I said, the soloist is vertical, and we're going to have him in the middle with everyone on the sides. So step 1 is to change the scale to fit the screen. Like I mentioned before, not everyone's video will be the same size, and so you may have to adjust for that. Especially with vertical, we have to scale it down so it fits in the screen, and then also take into consideration the fact that the way the timeline is set up, that whatever video is at the top here will be on top in the video. So the other videos are here, but you can't see them because the other videos are layered on top. So now that we have him in the middle, we're going to also scale down this next video. You're going to be using the effects panel over here on the left to change the scale and pull it down and over, and you can use these to move it up and down and left and right. So that looks to be about right. You can also I'm dragging these left and right to adjust them, but you can also type in the number for what you want. So I'm going to move him over to the bottom right. Then we're going to do the same for the next video. I'm going to move him over to the right. And as you can see, not everyone did the same framing for their video. This was one of the first videos that I did, and I didn't have as much control over what everyone was doing. What I would have suggested in this case, since as you can see, Aaron over here on the bottom right, he's pretty well framed in the video. He's in the center, he has room around his head, but Michael here on the right, his head is cut off. In a best case scenario, you would have him reshoot that so there is room to move. And if I wanted to, I could change Aaron's video to sort of match that zoom in and cut off his head as well. But we're going to leave that for now because you want everything to look coherent. So you kind of have to adjust to what is the most extreme example. So since we can't zoom him out, but we can zoom him in, if we wanted these two to look exactly the same, we would zoom Aaron in instead. So now to me, I'm going to move my video down on the bottom left. That was from when I hadn't shaved in a few days. Then repeat the process until you have all the videos set up in a grid like this. And as I mentioned, not every video has to have a background. For Into You, we had a white background. For this one, we're not having any background at all. Then and this is a great example of how some of these videos are different sizes. So in order to make everything look even, so Andy's video is slightly larger than the other videos. So I can crop it, or since it's already stacked, my video is already stacked over top of his, I'm just going to move his down a little so this bottom part is a bit more cut off. We have more room for Jonathan at the top. There we go. And then the last video, I'm going to move that to the top as well. And that is how to set up a simple grid video. We have everyone laid out in an even fashion like this. And from there, we can move them around however we want. If we wanted the entire video to be stagnant like this, we could play all these. We would all just sing in this design the entire time, and that would work fine. But next we're going to check out syncing to audio. So as you can see, we all started these videos at different times. Everyone is sort of ambling around. They're waiting for the music to start. They're listening to the MIDI because we sang along to the MIDI to record these. And what we do is, this is a bit of a difficult task there is an option. So there is an option to sort of so we add a track for this is the overall recorded audio that we have. It's already mixed together because we took the audio that we recorded live and then had it mixed and put into a single file. So we won't be using the audio from the original videos at all down here. But what we're going to be doing is listening to this audio to line it up. So sometimes you can sort of get away with syncing these. There is an option to sync the audio for these, but that won't work in this case because the audio from the overall mix and our individual parts isn't clear enough that the program can figure it out. So we have to do it by ear, unfortunately. We're going to take Nick's part here and listen to that real quick and then see if we can adjust it to the audio. So Nick has a large section of hums right at the beginning. And then right here, he has, that is a pretty good indicator for something to look at for, or we can go to the very beginning and see when he first starts his humming. And that is something that we can listen for in the original audio to line it up and sync it all together. So we're going to remove the beginning of the video from when he's just standing there. He's not singing yet. And then we're going to listen to the master audio again. And he comes in almost immediately. You can see sometimes it's best to do this visually as well. You can sort of see the waveforms at the bottom here. If you look at the bottom, you can see that it's silent and then hum right at the beginning. And so that's what we're going to look to line up. We can see that in Nick's audio as well. It's silent, and then we can line it up. Visually, and then see how that sounds. Unmute him. And that sounds pretty good. And then we can check the other part of the audio. Like I mentioned, he had an O here where it's a more clear visual indicator that he is singing, and see how that lines up. So you can see Nick cutting off and singing at the proper times to sync the audio. So now we're going to learn a bit more about a couple techniques. So that is what you need for the most basic grid video for possibly audition videos for competitions. If you're not having any craziness, any moving parts, moving the videos around, that is all you need repeat that process for syncing the audio, make sure all the videos line up to your master audio, which you'll learn about how to make more later. And that will get you going. But if you wanted to do a video more like the Into You video, you would use a couple of more advanced techniques, such as beat editing, which is syncing up the edits in your video to the music, which adds a lot of variety and movement and makes the song more visually interesting and makes it sort of coordinated with what you're listening to, which is a nice experience overall. And then we're also going to think about how to use movement. So I'm going to play a bit of this, a bit of Into You real quick, and I will show you a couple of examples of how I edited to the beat and used movement. So at the very beginning, there is the solo and there's some oohs and ahs, and it's very slidey and very drawn out. And so I tried to sort of match the simple flowiness of that to the video. So here we go. So the video starts moving as they say ooh and they move out. And then these two appear at the bottom as their parts come in. And then the bass and the beatboxer come in with the hard cut in. And then later I do something similar. So that's how to incorporate movement, but it can also be as simple as cutting out videos and putting them in. So in this section, I had everyone else stopped singing in the song. And so I cut out their video, and then they come in as there is this bass line going down and everyone starts singing their part. So I matched the video to that. So it's things like that to consider when editing your video to sort of make it more interesting. So I'm going to open my project for Into You, to show you a bit of the editing. And sorry, it looks like for some reason some of the videos are a bit corrupted for some reason. It wasn't like that earlier, so I apologize. That is very unfortunate. But
Daniel, one thing, I think we have to switch your share from your browser to the editing software.
Oh, I apologize.
No worries.
Thank you. So as you can see, some videos turned out a little weird for some reason, but same concepts apply. I'll just show you with the videos that aren't all wonky. So here we have Jess on the left. We don't need the other videos, so I'm just going to close some of them. And so we're going to go over to the effects tab here, and we're going to use the same concepts that I showed you before, using these little sliders over here to adjust the size and move the video around the frame. And then, but we're going to do that at specific timing. And the way you do that is through keyframes. And so keyframes are basically just little markers that you put into the program that tell Premiere Pro or whatever video editing software you're using, I'm going to be doing this effect at this time and I want to do this. So what I did for this is we are changing the size of the video and its position to sort of zoom out and move her over to the left. So the keyframes, you select the keyframes by going over here to the effects and you select toggle animation. And so you can see the specific moment that I selected them over here. You can zoom in and select it. I just select, so I'm going to undo the animation. It goes from 79 to 52. So I'm just going to delete what I had before and show you how I did it. So, oops, I was doing that on Sarah's. You have to select the correct video in order to, so now I'm going to delete the effect, and you can see that her video moves over to the left, but it doesn't get any smaller. And so now that I've deleted that effect, so what I'm going to do is go over to scale, select toggle animation. That will start the animation of the effect, but it won't go anywhere unless I change it. And so I am going to move this over to the time that I want. I want it to sort of match up with this other effect here. So it's going to end at the exact same time. I'm going to select add keyframe. I change it to the size that I want. So in this case, it was 52. I believe. I may have been wrong. Oh. Oh, there we go, 72. So now that I've added that, so what I did was I started at the beginning. It was this. I apologize. I'm going to redo this. So this is 72. So I started the animation, and then I went over to this section and I changed it to a different size. And so what that does is that automatically it starts at this point in time and ends at this point in time, and it's going to change it from the original size to the size that I selected within that point, within those 2 points. So now that I've added the keyframe over here, once it starts, it will get smaller according to the size that I chose. And for the matching the editing to the music, as you can see, I did that at the time when she starts singing the ooze, because I wanted sort of that smooth motion to match the ooze. So I can believe or as I showed you before, the sort of descending part with the bass where everything shows up. Again, the videos are messed up for some reason, but all I did was I went through and I selected and I listened to the part and I changed the position at which the video comes in by just cutting the video to that point. So a good way to sort of keep track of this is by using the marker function. You can do that just by pressing M on your keyboard. And so you listen to the markers will pop up here. And so you just listen to the music. And so I selected the marker on all the beats where I needed to cut the video, and so this one was on this marker here, and so I just cut the video right on that marker, delete it, and then the video comes in at that point in time. So that is the basics of what you need for putting together a grid video and a video with more motion and connection to your music. There's such a wide variety of editing styles you can use to make your videos more visually interesting. These didn't even incorporate any physical choreography. The choreography was all expressed through the video, but you can do that. You can put in your own choreography, you can put in your own style, you can put videos in the background or change the colors or move the videos around the screen. All the most basic concepts are some of the most effective. As you can see, most of my editing was done just by changing the position of different videos with size and position on the screen, and just by cutting them in different places to add more effect. So it's simple, it's straightforward, and it's all about it's only the limit of your imagination that can make your videos visually interesting. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Daniel. That was super useful. We had some questions in the chat, but I think they were mostly answered. We will be having the Q&A session at the end, so definitely if you guys have any questions that you think of later, be sure to ask that then. For now, we have Apurva, who's going to talk about just like an introduction to the audio software, an introduction to like what is mixing and what is editing. So Apurva, if you want to take over, introduce yourself and take it away, go for it.
Sure. Hello, everyone, all 94 of you. It's good to be here. I'm Apurva. I was a member of Cornell Thorana for 4 years up until my graduation earlier this year. And I kind of got into mixing videos for Thorana about midway, and I've kind of mixed and produced a bunch of the videos that you'll see on our YouTube channel. And yeah, I'm just going to want to talk to y'all about just like a big higher level idea about what is mixing and editing, like what are all these terms and ideas that you probably would have heard of but are not really quite sure of, and how to kind of get into a mixing mindset, and just like an intro of some of the things that you'll be seeing in the demos that are coming up after me. So the first question that we want to answer is, why do we mix audio? You know, why are we doing any of this? Like, why do we edit? The answer is when you think about singing live or you being in a live audience, there's a huge number of factors that actually influence your experience of like experiencing that audio or sound that aren't actually related to the sound itself. When you think about like going to a concert, going to an a cappella show, or singing on stage as part of a group, you know, a whole lot of things play into that. Maybe it's like the people you're with or the lighting, it's the excitement of the show, you know, the anticipation. And that can actually influence your experience of the sound a lot more than you might think. By contrast, when we record like a grid video or something else like remote for like a submission for like a competition or whatever, a lot of those factors are not present. And so you have to put your attention on just the sound. And so the question is, without all of those external factors in play, how do we recreate the experience of hearing great a cappella that will leave like a lasting impression? You know, when you think about like the first time you've like seen like a great a cappella video on YouTube that maybe left like your jaw hanging open, obviously the huge part of it is like the, you know, the skill of the people involved, but what also a lot of work goes into creating the mix to help create the feeling that you know, walked away with. And like so many things, this is a kind of a subjective art, and there's like millions of options thrown at you when you open an audio software that might be confusing or sometimes maybe intimidating. And obviously there are like infinitely many ways that you can mix together individual recordings. But there are some key concepts and key techniques that are probably fundamental to all of those approaches. And that's what we're going to want to cover for the latter half of this panel. And so our aim is to kind of clarify and demonstrate those concepts that you'll need for the submissions particularly, but we also do want to kind of show and you know, remind everyone that like mixing and editing doesn't need to be overly technical or complicated, but it is an important part of the process that can also be really fun and accessible to everyone as they're going out to create a great a cappella. So one thing you want obviously is software to, you know, do any of this. And most audio production software or digital audio workstations, you might hear that term as well, will kind of offer the same set of base functionality that you can kind of achieve similar results with all of them. But some things are better suited for better different DAWs. And I myself use FL Studio. It's $250 for the full version, but the demo is actually unrestricted and fully free, and you can use it like as if it was a full version. The only exception is that you cannot reopen save files. And this kind of tends to be used for like EDM productions. I know like in the mid 2010s, it was used for that kind of stuff a lot. There's also Ableton, which I know Shaunak uses, which you might be seeing later on. And that's commonly used like in industry for live performances. You might see that associated with people like Diplo or Skrillex or deadmau5. And the cost can range between like $90 or $80 to $600, depending on which version you go for. But there are educational discounts available as well, and a free 90-day trial, so you can check that out. And finally, there's also Logic, which you'll be seeing from Akhil later on. And that is kind of used in all kinds of different musical genres in production, and it costs $200. But most of the features and the interface is similar to GarageBand, which you probably know is free to all Mac computers. If you're on Windows, then sorry, I guess. So let's start off like with just some definitions of some key phrases you might be hearing and that you want to keep in mind. And that is the difference between editing, mixing, and mastering. So when we're talking about editing, what that refers to is any change to a sound that is more physical in nature. So that might entail things like volume or length or pitch, things that can like that might fundamentally affect the structure of a sound. So that might cover things like pitch correction or cutting a sound or amplifying or splicing sounds together, but it would not cover things like reverb or echo or the effects that you would add on top of that. By contrast, mixing is the process that takes like multiple individual recordings and puts them together into one cohesive sum or mix. And so this is where most of the process is going to take place. That's because while you're mixing, you have access to each individual track and you're able to like change its properties relative to all the others. So, you know, while you're working on a mix and you have 12 different tracks from all the people in your group, for each one, you can individually affect the volume level, like pan each one to the left or the right, maybe automate so that some effect can change dynamically throughout the mix, things like that. And finally, mastering is the last thing that you'd be thinking of. And that's kind of the final part of the chain that involves the decisions made in releasing a fully fledged finished mix. So that's going to be questions like, you know, how loud is this going to be? Do I want to compress this to some extent? Or like, what's this going to sound like when I play it on this speaker or that speaker? You know, and soon we're going to be jumping into some demos, but some like high level things that you might want to keep in mind while you're watching this and also going out and doing any mixing yourself is a question to ask yourself is what is the effect that I'm trying to sell? You know, am I trying to like blast the audience off their feet with something like huge, like a wall of sound? Or am I trying to kind of draw them in and keep their attention with something quieter, like a soulful mix? And those kind of decisions might influence the decisions you make, say like the volume levels or how you choose to add effects to your background versus your solo. And one very important thing to keep in mind is that no amount of mixing or editing can replace the talent and skill of your singers. And so despite all the things that we're going to be showing you today, if your singers cannot sell a performance, then FL Studio cannot sell that performance or Logic cannot sell that performance either. So as important as this part of the process is, it really does start at the singing, and you know that's not something that you would ever want to forget. And also, you know, as you're going out and making your mixes, a good thing to do, kind of a general tip for everyone is just to take breaks every so often so that you can listen to your mix every so often with a fresh set of ears, and you know, pay attention to things you might have overlooked the last time. So yeah, so that is my spiel, and we're going to hand off to the next panelists. But also, if you have any questions about all the wall of text I just gave you, the chat window is also there. Thanks.
That was a great video, definitely useful. We did have a question about like software that we can use, but this is definitely something we can go more into detail about during the Q&A session. But for now, we have Daivik, who's going to show us audio recording techniques. So if you want to go ahead.
Yeah, for sure. So can y'all hear me?
Yep, go for it.
Yep.
Sweet. So today I'm just going to be talking a little bit about more low level, like basic recording guidelines and what's important to keep in mind before recording, during recording, and while tracking, and sort of like just basic tips and tricks for whatever DAW you're using, because recording is basically like very similar across the different DAWs. I'm personally going to be using Logic Pro today. So let's see. So before recording, a few basic things that you would want to keep in mind pertaining particularly to your arrangement are details like starting pitch, the key of the song, ideal recording tempos and BPM, and like whether your arrangement has certain sections that have variable factors in them that, where if there's like an accelerando or a retardando happening in certain sections, and also for like dynamics and stuff, like you want to be able to highlight those sections out to whoever's producing your track to be able to set up the project appropriately. And yeah, as Apurva just said, one thing that's really important is to make sure that people know their music. So knowing your part and practicing enough in sectionals and like really getting it down before you actually record, like really, really helps the recording process and speeds it up. Yeah, we can't stress that enough. And yeah, I'd say like for this remote recording situation, one thing that's important is you need to become comfortable singing parts alone, as opposed to singing as part of a group for these kind of situations. So things like, which some people struggle with, like pulling away from the mic during louder or more high-pitched sections of the arrangement, and like just mic phobia in general needs to be avoided. Yeah, so when you're recording, make sure that you particularly drill things that can't really be fixed in post, like the style and your vowel placements and the color and timbre. So those are like really important things to keep in mind for vocalists. So this is sort of mentally how to prepare yourself for recording. And now about your environment. So for the best results of any kind of recording, you want to make sure to acoustically dampen your environment. This is a pretty important part for every recording vocalist. You'd want to select a recording location that's preferably a medium-sized room, and if possible, if you have the option, carpets are preferred, and make sure that they're acoustically dead. So there's a wide range of items you could use to dampen acoustics in a room. You could use like acoustic foam or sound panels, or egg crates, or even like thick to medium weight blankets that you could throw up on your walls, or any like reflective sound surfaces. Basically just be aware of your surroundings while capturing any kind of audio. So now another thing I would say that is pretty important is mic placement. So when you're recording, you'd have to be smart and aware about the type of mic you're using and where you are placed relative to the mic. So let's say, first off, like, let me talk about like a few of the types and like parameters that you'd have to consider in mics. So there are different sizes of mics. There's like large, medium, and small diaphragm mics, which often deal with like the sound pressure that is allowed to vibrate within the mic itself. So vocalists would prefer using large or medium diaphragm mics. And there's also mics with different polar patterns that you'd have to consider. So there's cardioid mics, or also known as directional microphones. There's omnidirectional microphones, which pick up sound from all directions around it. There's bicardioid mics, which pick up in the front and rear. So you need to be aware of what kind of mic you have or you're planning on purchasing if you want to record using a condenser mic, and be aware of its polar pattern and size to optimally position yourself and get the best input to also ensure maximum reduction of ambient noise. So also, like, for example, bass vocalists and beatboxers would also need to take advantage of the proximity effect. So this is basically an effect that's best observed in condenser microphones or cardioid microphones, which are directional. So the proximity effect tends to give like a deeper, richer, and more resonant sound. especially to like lower and mid frequency voice parts like bass or beatbox, particularly with cardioid microphones. And another thing to keep in mind while we're on this topic is for beatboxers and bass vocalists, you'd often have to keep in mind of avoiding or being careful with plosives. So like the P, K, T, so the p, k, t, those kind of sounds, or like even like sibilants, like the sh, z, and the j, those kind of sounds that you make would have to, you'd have to avoid those kind of sounds from peaking in the audio signal that you're inputting into your mic while recording. For plosives, like you could use a pop filter. So for people who are wondering, this is what a pop filter looks like. Sibilants can also be fixed, usually with volume automation or wideband de-essing. So that's, again, some mixing and editing stuff that Akhil will talk about right after. So now there's also the option of using like headphone or headset mics and iPhones or mobile devices in general. But personally, I think it would be best to use like solo and beatbox. It would be best to use cardioid or directional microphones, which since they're better quality and they do a much better job in capturing low and mid frequencies. This is also because like, mobile devices can only hold so much and they usually have tiny omnidirectional condenser mics within them. So keep that in mind when you're recording. Ensemble parts can, in my opinion, be recorded using mobile devices. So another thing that you might also want to consider is when you're recording through, let's say a third-party application or, something off your mobile device, a lot of apps have built-in compression and noise gate tools that, already process your raw audio for you when you're exporting them into your DAW. So keep that in mind and try to use, if you're looking for like a completely raw file, which we often are, try to use like regular voice memos and like try to, switch your settings to, not include those kind of effects being processed on your audio. I also think gain input plugins and channel EQ plugins can be used to fix gain level issues in the mix for mobile device recordings. If you have any issues with how loud, if any issues with the gain not being high enough or stuff like that. So yeah, I would also say one really important thing is like aim for consistency in sound across all recording devices. So be mindful of like, the mic placement you use while recording with a certain device and keep it consistent for the duration of your section for the arrangement. So those really help maintain like consistent gain levels while you're recording remotely. So now to talk specifics about some budget microphone setups. I've personally found a lot of budget microphones on Amazon and online in general within $100. And even towards the cheaper side, I've found like condenser microphones even under 50. So you could definitely take a look. But I think one main thing to consider is while buying a condenser microphone is if you would want it to go through an XLR connection or you just want a USB mic. So if you pick the XLR connection, which is what most home studios use, I personally use that too. It would also require an audio interface or a microphone preamplifier, which is basically this little audio box which helps convert your analog waves into digital waves so that your DAW can interact with it. So for example, I use the Audio-Technica 2020, which is considered a pretty good budget microphone, which I got for about $90. And I know there's also some pretty good equipment out there, which could be cheaper depending on your requirements. There's like Audio-Technica, there's M-Audio, and there's some like cheaper options with MXL and like Shure. So make sure you check them out. My mic preamp is the Scarlett Solo, which is manufactured by Focusrite. So these are just a few names that you could. Behringer also makes a pretty good affordable microphone preamplifier for people who are looking for that. So definitely do check those out. And there's often a lot of bundle deals to go with buying the setup together. So for mobile device recorders or like recording vocalists, I would suggest also maybe looking into like tiny microphones, directional microphones that can be directly plugged into your mobile device. That's also another option. I know for iPhone, there's an option by Shure. I think it's the MV88. It's a digital stereo condenser. So look out for like, you know, a bunch of options like that too, if that's something that interests you. And yeah, you'd need like some form of decent headphones to mix with, you know, if you're going to be mixing. So I'm sure, you know, the others panelists will cover that. I personally use Logic Pro as my DAW, which, as Apurva said, it's $200 if you want to, you know, buy the full licensed version. There's also some basic options for recording and like presets and like, you know, mixing options available on GarageBand, which comes free with all Apple devices. Some other DAW options out there are, you know, Ableton, Logic, Reaper, FL Studio, Pro Tools, GarageBand, Cubase. There's just like a lot, you know, you could really like you wouldn't run out of options. So that's just my spiel about, you know, basic guidelines and things to keep in mind while you're recording and before recording. So now during recording, there's a few things that, you know, you might like, a few very basic things that you might want to keep in mind. So let me share my screen.
Also, just one thing that while you're sharing your screen, just for everybody on the call, just to know that all the kind of the recommendations that Daivik and the other presenters are making will be compiled in kind of like a document format and sent out to all the team captains. So if you're hurriedly writing it down and didn't catch something you said, don't worry about it. Along with the recording, you'll kind of get those lists of things that were mentioned and recommended as well. All right, go ahead, David.
Okay. Can you all see my
Oh,
screen?
another thing, sorry, just to interject, any like A3 and ASA specific questions, whether that means bid comps or A3 itself, we can do that towards the end because I know there's a lot of questions coming in about that.
Perfect. Can you all see my screen?
Yep, that's great.
Okay, awesome. So just sort of to get started here, this is the interface for Logic Pro. And right off the bat, you notice, like, I'm just gonna go over some really, really basic things of Logic Pro and like how to lay down tracks, like as a very, you know, basic discussion here. So you notice on the top display, there's like, you know, a bunch of options, play, you know, you could rewind to the start, and like there's a bunch of like record and looping options and too, which I'll get into. So I personally recommend, like, while starting, you would want to start off with setting a BPM for your project, and, you know, having it in the right key and stuff. It helps with, like, you know, pitch correction and other things that you might want to consider in mixing. But yeah, in general, this is the interface, and there's also this is the library for like presets you might want to use, you know, on your voice during mixing. There's also the inspector, you know, where you have all your buses, you have your audio effects, which you can deal with. There's also the mixer, which let's see here. Yeah, there's also the mixer here, where, you know, you have your faders and you can keep track of panning and, like, you know, different things that effects you've applied on your mix. So that's just, you know, very, very basic, I guess, like overview of like what options, like, you know, a DAW has to offer. This is very, again, like very different depending on what DAW you're using. GarageBand and Logic look really similar though. So right here, I just wanted to showcase a little demo of, let's say we want to, okay, so this is like a little 3-part acapella thing I recorded this morning for the song by Shy, like If I Ever. So it's just the beginning of it. So everyone hear that properly?
I think I think the audio didn't come through. I think you might have to stop share and reshare with audio turned on. Can you try? Actually, can you try one more time?
Okay.
Let's double check. Yeah, unfortunately, I don't think it's coming through. Yeah, could you? I think you might have to. Yeah, stop share.
I think you have to change your audio settings.
Okay.
So
How about
switch
now?
to Zoom audio. Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds great. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. Whoops. Okay. So what we have here, I'm just gonna go really basic first. So when you hit this plus icon on the top left, you have options over here to create, a MIDI file, and what we want is going to be an audio track. So you go ahead, you can create an audio track, and right off the bat, you notice over here, there's like a bunch of options. So there's options for muting the track, there's options for soloing the track, so that's the only track you hear. There's a record enable option where you can enable recording for that particular track, so it's prepped up to go. And above over here, you have options like metronome and like, these are your options for clicks. So I highly recommend using a click track or like just using a metronome to keep, your in time. And that helps with keeping it consistent with like huge collaborative projects like this. So let's see. So another thing that you can do here is you have these sliders for the gain levels. Definitely, like, you can mess around with that as well, depending on like how much of an audio signal you want or not. So one thing that you always want to consider is, can you see the mixer that's popped up here?
I don't think so, unfortunately.
Oh, you can't? Okay, wait, let me see. Can you see this now? Is that good?
Yes. That's
okay,
great.
Cool. So yeah, I guess, when I was talking about the mixer earlier, y'all can see what I was saying. But yeah, basically, this is the mixer where, you have all your faders and you have your, panning and like a bunch of stuff that you can control from here for every track. So it's kind of like your central hub to keep track of, the levels in your mix. So let's take a look at this, these two tracks when we play them. So you notice that, the signals are mostly green. So that means that's what we're aiming for. We're aiming for healthier signals, and, we don't want them to clip. So what clipping is, if we turn up the gain, sorry. So what clipping is while recording, if you record with a gain level that's too high, and these signals just sort of go into the red zone in your stereo output, that's usually sort of going to lead to some like an unpleasant, distorted or breaking up kind of sound, which you always want to avoid, especially when you're working with like, easily like it's going to be 30 over like 30 tracks when it's, a big team recording. So let's go over, so this is our lead. So now this knob over here is used for panning. So what panning means is to sort of direct the audio to the left or the right channel. So if you, let's try it out with this. So as you can see, this this track is panned all the way to the left. So you should be able to hear it only on the left side. Yeah. So, and this is panned to the right. So often what, in mixes that have a lot of vocal tracks, often what we do is a technique called doubling, where we record this a certain part, like let's say, this lead melody, and we record it again. So we do another take, of the same part, and we play them together to give like a rich, thicker sound overall. But one thing that, happens when you just keep doubling tracks and you just have a bunch of tracks out there, all like which are not panned, is they all sum up. And like in the end, like you end up getting this huge massive sound in your stereo output, which you really don't want, which is why we use panning. So let's take a listen to this, which is not panned, which is just center panned. And let's take a listen to the lead over here, which is doubled, which is panned left and right. Ooh, da, da, doo, doo, doo. Now, if we play these, ooh, da, da, doo, doo, doo. You can automatically, like, you could see that, you know, it leaves a lot of space in the mix, and like it makes the mix wider, and that gives a lot of options and like really helps when, you know, you're dealing with a lot of vocal tracks together. So one common technique is LCR panning, which is left, center, right, which, you know, you tend to take certain instruments or certain vocal parts and like pan them to the left, and you take a different section, pan them to the right. Instruments that you want, or the main vocals, like solos that you want to be heard, that are pan center, which really like gives width to the entire mix. And it also allows you to create space for like, you know, other layers that you have. So let's take a listen to, I guess, let's see. Let me also like try recording in something over here. Can you all hear me through the mic, or is it echoed?
There's a bit of an echo. Maybe you could mute your Zoom.
Yeah. Can you hear me through the mic?
Yep, sounds good.
Okay. So let's see. One thing that you can do before I record is there's this option up here where you can sort of select a section to cycle through and loop through for audio files, which I find really helpful. I'm also going to demonstrate a technique called comping, where you record and then it keeps looping through it, and you're allowed to keep recording as many takes as you want. And you can select the best take out of, you know, how many ever you record. So let's take a look at that. Ooh, da da doo, doo doo. Ooh. One sec. Ooh, da da doo, doo doo. Ooh, da da doo, doo doo. Ooh, da da doo, doo doo. Okay, so let's take a listen to that. So this is the first take. Ooh, da da doo, doo doo. This is the second take. So as you can see, so this is what comping is. You create a comp folder filled with multiple takes that you've just done. That allows you to be flexible with, you know, even if you mess up a take, you can just keep going and you could select the best one. Ooh, da da doo, doo doo. And yeah, there's three of them. So another thing that you can do is, yeah, again, this I guess Akhil would cover this in his thing, but these are, you know, you can always like select the best parts of like a certain comp and like deal with fading and stuff between those to sort of iron it out, like when you're trying to edit. But I'll let him take care of that. So now let's just take a listen. So that's sort of how, you know, you'd go about recording each part. So that was the solo part. And then there's a, let's see. that's the upper harmony that's again doubled, and then there's a lower. So now all together as a really basic so yeah, that's pretty much it, you know, when it comes to tracking. Some standard practices would be, you know, having like a rough placeholder track or a scratch track in place, you know, whether it's a reference track with MIDI or, you know, like just you singing it out roughly, like that you can sort of follow while you're actually recording or doing multiple takes. And yeah, I think that's all I had to sort of say. So yeah.
Great, thank you so much for that intro demo, Daivik. Just a reminder to everyone that we will be sending out like a list of the brand names and everything that he dropped, so don't worry about keeping track of all of that. But we will move right along to Akhil, who's gonna give us a little further demo about like editing and aligning basics. So if you wanna go ahead.
Hello? Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, Singha. I'm Akhil. I was the music director for the last 2 years of UCSD Satare. And in terms of recording and editing, I was involved in like our album. And I was in charge of arranging for the last 2 years. And I also like made my own vocal arrangements, like recorded my arrangements myself. And recently we have, we're about to finish a project that will be released soon, where we, it's a quarantine video. Everyone like recorded themselves using their iPhones. And I wanted to go over that today because I think that's most relevant to what people are actually going to be doing. And yeah, so some of the things that I wanted to go over are so MIDI. So you know, getting your arrangement into your DAW and aligning your tracks according to it's very important to get kind of your environment set up with your MIDI, and then getting your tracks in and then aligning them to those notes. And then let's see, yeah. So I'll be going over how to do some basic editing with those clips. Putting a noise gate on is very essential, especially for the kind of tracks that we're using, which are iPhone recordings. So there's going to be a lot of noise. And what else? Let's see. Some like basic, other basic editing techniques like fading in and out, crossfading, some basic pitch correction. Not all of your tracks are going to be perfectly on time, not perfectly on pitch. So although I will say that you definitely want everything to be as on pitch as possible. And if they aren't, just tell the person to record again. But if there's a note that's like annoying you, I'll just go over how to just like move the pitch around just a little bit. And then organization. So how to organize your files, your tracks in Logic. This is very useful, especially for someone like me. I like to keep everything organized so it looks nice and it's just easy to use. Yeah, and then I'll be going along, as I go along, I'll be showing you some best practices things, some like common commands to use on Logic. And yeah, I think that's everything that I wanted to go over. I'll start sharing my screen now. All right, so I'm gonna start with an empty Logic file. Oh, yeah. Logic kind of opens up the most recent file whenever you open it up. So let me open a new file and then we can get started, get our environment set up. Okay, so, right. So when you open up Logic, there's a lot that you can do with it. And some of this might be confusing at first. So I'll try to go over as much of the basic details as possible. So when you start, you're gonna wanna create an audio file. You could add all of these other instrument files. I'm just gonna create an audio file and just get started. So the first thing you wanna do is put your MIDI file in. And so what is MIDI? MIDI is a format for notes, basically. It has all the information about the notes that you're inputting into your, and those notes can be modified in any way by digital instruments. So, so yeah, so the MIDI file that I'm bringing in is a, let's see, I exported it from MuseScore. I'm not sure what other people use, but most notation software has a feature to export MIDI. And so that's what we have right here. It's a .mid file. I'm going to be adding it in. And once you add that in, what will happen is it'll import all the information. So including time signatures, key, tempo, which is very useful because setting that up yourself is kind of a huge task. So let's import that with the tempo. Oh, okay, let's move it. Okay, so 120 beats per minute. Okay, wait, let me do that again. I think it kind of messed up. Okay. Okay, perfect. So our BPM is 105. It's in 4/4, A flat minor. As you see, so in this specific arrangement, there's like a bar of 5/4, so it imported that as well. And yeah, so it imports everything. So that's about it with the MIDI stuff. Let's try to drag in some clips. So I have some of my lovely sopranos and mezzos. Let me just add in some of these files. And what works best is wave files from what I've used with Logic. It just sometimes with MP3 or other formats, it just like it doesn't process the audio as well, and it kind of yeah. So yeah, definitely try to use wave files. And so the next thing I want to do is show you some of the track presets that you can use. So so for this specific soprano file, let's see, you can add all of these different vocal presets, and I'm just going to try classic vocal. And so I think Daivik mentioned that this is where all of your track information is. Here is the stack of audio effects that you can use. And that is different for each preset. So you see it adds EQ, compression, all of that stuff. We're not going to be going too into detail about this. And this is kind of why Logic is preferable to use, because it has all of this stuff built in. You don't have to add anything in yourself. What I'm going to do is maybe take out some of the reverb and delay and stuff from this. And okay, let's listen to this. I think I have to change my audio. Do you guys hear that? I'm not sure what's happening. Okay, there we go. I think my playhead just disappeared for a sec.
Yeah, I don't think you can hear, unfortunately.
Oh, let me, oh, it's the sharing thing. Okay, let me just stop sharing for a sec.
Yeah, there you go.
Can you guys hear that?
Yeah, I can hear that.
Okay, perfect. So what I'm gonna do first is add a noise gate. This is very essential for some of the, especially if you're not using a condenser mic, a nice mic where there won't be any noise. So let's go ahead and add a noise gate. And then what you wanna focus on is here, your threshold and your reduction. So you're gonna be setting a threshold under which everything is gonna be removed. All your sound is gonna be removed. Let's try this. And you wanna reduce by, let's see. Let's try this. Yeah, so all the like noise, background noise is kind of gone. You can hear kind of the person like rustling around, like moving things around. But for the most part, the background noise is gone. Yeah, so that is the noise gate. I'd say top three things to worry about. Noise is can be a pain in the ass to work. But yeah, now let's try to align these tracks with the MIDI. Let me just add the same effect on the double that we have. It was that and about there. Okay, perfect. Okay, so now I think is a good time to talk about gain. As you might have seen, that distorted, and it sounded really, yeah, so it just sounded really distorted. So what I like to do is don't mess with this knob over here. This is one way to set your gain, but you want to kind of just leave it at 0. And that is mainly because of the automation that you will want to do in the future. I don't think we're going to be talking about automation too much right now, but basically you can dynamically move around your volumes. And that is kind of controlled by this feature here. Looks kind of scary, but to set the gain of your tracks, you want to go over here. So let's select both the tracks, and you have a lot of different options for changing the sound of your track. The gain over here, as you can see, it changed the waveform of the track. Now let's try to play it. Still pretty loud. Let's move it down even more. Okay. So I think another thing that I wanted to do is align this track with the MIDI. So let's try to move this. So what I usually do is, so your tracks are not going to be as like on time as you want them to be. And this is where knowing your arrangement comes in handy. There's some points in your arrangement where you know people are going to be on time. For this arrangement, let's see. Yeah, so this part specifically is where I think most people are going to be on time. And so I would go to that point in the audio. So let's just do this one track right now. So that ooh is what I want to target. Select to go to the beginning of that, and then so let's see. Let's play this track. Yeah, that ooh. That's where the ooh is. Now let's try to move that to kind of the right place. Just a little more. Nice. That ooze all the way over here. My bad. So this does take a lot of like fiddling around with the audio. Let me just try to get this as so yeah, I think this would take a lot more like time to like really perfect the timing of. So I don't want to go too deep into this. I think I only have like 20 minutes left, or 20 minutes in total. So yeah, this MIDI file is very useful for setting the timing of your tracks. And let's see, next thing I wanted to talk about was pitch correction. So if you do want to change the pitch of just like anything, any track, what you want to do is so there's this thing called flex in Logic. You can flex the time, you can flex the pitch, and so here you go. You want to turn it on and it'll, these are your options for flex. So right now it has sectioned off parts of your track to indicate where different notes are. Obviously, this is not like a beatboxing track, so it's not very accurate. What you want to do is select flex pitch, and it'll give you these notes, which you can alter. So the two main things that I use with pitch correction here is changing the pitch itself. So as you see, it's -22. You want to move it up. Slide that up to 0 if you want, and then the vibrato is just like the small variations in pitch within that note that exist, and you can kind of straighten out the note by reducing the vibrato, or you can even accentuate the vibrato by a lot, which sounds really, really funky. But what you want to do here is just do that. If a note is like kind of off pitch, I don't suggest doing this too much. You should ideally have all your pitches in, like all your tracks on pitch. So you can see how it kind of straightened out that pitch, so it's very consistent. And one of the last things I wanted to talk about is crossfading and organizing your tracks. So something that I did at the end of each track is extend the note of the last note, the very last note. Let me see where that is. So what I ended up doing is just copying over the same note multiple times, but there is a problem with this, and you'll hear it when I play it. You hear there's a clip at the end of each track. So what you want to do is go over here. There's this fade out button slider, and you want to set that to crossfade. So what a crossfade is let me just select this and show you. So you can put a crossfade on all of those. Let's just set it at like 66. Okay. So what is happening is essentially it is fading out of the first track and fading into the first track. It's the second track at the same time. So that eliminates, let's see. So that clipping is taken out by that. Crossfading is very, very handy, very useful. And I think I have forgotten to mention this, but a useful command for Logic is Command T. You can split a track into two by just using Command T. All of your standard commands like Command Z to undo, Command A to select all the tracks, all of that is still there. Let's see, what else? Command C, Command B, yeah, Command X. All of that is the same. The next thing I wanted to go over is organization. So let me open the full project that I've been that these MIDIs and these tracks are a part of. I'm not going to say that. Yeah, this is a huge file, so it takes a while to open. Okay, so the first thing that I wanted to mention about organization is kind of, organizing your parts into folders. And so I have all my sopranos here. They're all in one folder. And let me show you how to make this folder. So let me just drag all of these out of the folder for now. And so I've selected all the tracks. These are all my lovely sopranos. And now let me create a track stack. So create a track stack. You want to create a summing stack so it sums up all the tracks. Yeah, so now you have so now it's in a file, it's in one folder, and you can move it around, you can open it, do some editing. I've done a bunch of editing to these tracks. Cut them up. There's some fades here. I think there was a note here that I might have excised to just like, because I don't know, I just thought it wasn't, it stuck out. And so what you want to do in that case is fade out here. So you can see that fade out here and fade in. So you don't have that clipping as we saw in the previous example. Some other things that you can do with these stacks is you can put effects on all of these stacks. So for each stack, I have a compressor that's on them. I don't think we're going to be going too into detail about compressors, but basically the reason I did that is to make everything cohesive. All the sopranos and all the mezzos, all the parts sound cohesive within their own parts. So nothing sticks out and their blend is perfect. Yeah. And
so Akhil, I think we have to start wrapping up to the next demo. If you have any last thoughts before we move on.
Yeah, I think the last thing I wanted to talk about within this demo project is, as you see, I've panned all the vocals, all the background vocals, and the solo is dead center. All of the beatboxing stuff is also kind of dead center. There's some tracks that are moved to the left and right. And yeah, that's basically how I like to organize my tracks. There is the MIDI, of course. The solo is also in a folder. Yeah, I think that's everything that I wanted to talk about. I hope you guys took some useful tips and tricks away from this. I've learned a lot of these things along the way just by fiddling around with Logic. Also, there's lots of forums online. If there's a particular sound that you want to go for, just Google it. There's lots of people out there to answer your questions and get you that sound that you really want. And yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yes. So we, just to like talk about that fiddling process, we want to have Shaunak and Apurva just give you a demo what it's like to do from the beginning to the end of a mixing session. So if you guys want to start the demo, anyone who has to leave, please put your questions in the chat and we will ask it during the Q&A at the end. And yes, it's recorded, so just check back for that. All right.
All right, awesome. So what's up, everybody? My name is Shaunak. Real quick, I was on the Macapella, arranged a lot, and then handled a lot of the albums that we put out during my time there. And then right now I work professionally in the Desi music industry. So I have a good amount of experience in production, mixing, making my own originals, things of that nature. What I want to talk about real quick before we wrap up the session and jump into the Q&A is right now you're probably super overwhelmed if you have never worked in anything audio related before and you're like, oh my goodness, what am I supposed to use? Like I have to do this audition video that's coming up. And what I want to try and show you is how to achieve what I would think is the best possible result with as minimum things as you need to do. So hopefully you find that useful. I'm gonna have Apurva, he's gonna be keeping an eye on the chat and he'll be able to answer any questions that you have, or he'll toss them to me and we'll be able to handle it from there. I like things to be interactive, so feel free to be active in chat, so we feel like we're doing fun stuff. So we're gonna hop right in. I work in Ableton, and I'm just gonna quickly orient you. It's gonna look a little bit different than Logic. Akhil, let me know if you can see my screen. I see your face. That's why I'm asking you.
Yeah, I can see your screen.
Okay, perfect. So all I want you to notice is that now the track labels and everything are over here. And where you had seen a bunch of knobs and things before in Logic, you should see this 0 is the track fader. When I say track fader, all I want you to think is everything that's in the track if I move it down or up in volume. That's all you need to know for right now. That C that you see over there is the panning that you saw as a knob in Logic. Same thing. That's just dictating how much of the signal is going to come in through the left side versus coming in through the right side. Over here, I have all the files that, imagine yourself, you're in charge of doing this. This is a big job. You're nervous. You don't know if you're going to be able to do it, but I promise you, you will. You've got all of these files lined up over here. And the first thing that I want you to do is you're going to pull all of them in, however that is within your DAW. And then you're going to be super overwhelmed for a minute because you're like, holy crap, there's so many files. There's so many people. It's all good. What you need to do is just go through, make things easier for yourself. And as Akhil was showing you, organize it for yourself. And don't think too technically here, right? If you're a music director, if you're somebody that's familiar with how to conduct the group when you're singing, when you're practicing, think of it that way. You're gonna be able to tell individual people, hey, I need you to be a little bit softer here, a little bit louder here, or you're gonna tell a part, hey, sopranos, I need you to be a little bit softer, a little bit louder. Or you're going to tell your background, hey, background, I need you to be a little bit softer, a little bit louder, and set yourself up that way in terms of your organization, however that may be in your DAW. The other thing is you saw that we talked about double tracking frequently here. And the reason why we double track is that when something is in mono, you may have heard that term during the session today, that means that the information in the left and the information on the right is exactly the same. Stereo means that the information in the left and right is different, and that difference is what we perceive as width. So when we say to double track the vocals and you have one person singing the same thing, but 2 different takes, and we pan one to the left, pan one to the right, the listener will perceive that as width. So using this, these panning tools over here in this DAW, that's how you would achieve that. So if we just listen right here, quickly to this alto line, and I set all of these, left and right. This is one track. I'm gonna just say A1, and this is the A1, 2, and I'll zoom it in. So again, you don't get overwhelmed, not too many tracks going on. Have these panned left and right so that we get a nice wide sound. I don't know if the stereo's coming through, probably not. That was probably mono, but trust me on that one. So after you go through and you have organized things for yourself, I'm going to jump into another session where I have done that part. So we'll be able to be a little bit streamlined with it. And I'm going to briefly pause there to take questions about organization, because I think if you just set up the organization for yourself the best way that you can, you will be in great position to just, provide something that is more than acceptable for your audition videos. So let me reshare my screen. Yeah, and then Apurva is mentioning Zoom audio throwing everything out as mono, so you'll just have to use your imagination there. So let me share again. Okay, I'm gonna also try and have the chat up as well, just so I can see it too more chat.
And Shaunak, did you double track every track?
Every track. I'm trying to. I don't know where the chat is. It's not showing up. All right, just let me know if somebody hollers in there. I don't think let me know if you can hear this real fast. Yep, okay, good. So what you see over here is now how I have organized things. I'm a big visual person. I love rainbows, so that's why you see stuff set up like a rainbow here. Don't pay any attention to it. Do whatever color scheme works for you. But the main thing I want you to notice is what you saw as track stacks that Akhil was showing you in Logic. consider this the same type of thing. Ableton is just called grouping. You'll also hear the term bussing. Those are just the things I want you to think about here. So here we have the sopranos all set up, and you see, again, each individual person has been double tracked. So you've asked them to record twice, same BPM, same key, everything. And you have gone, and let me see if I can, is there a pointer? Again, just imagine the pointer, I guess. I don't know where it is, my bitty. So over here, you see again that I have changed the panning accordingly. Now there was a question earlier in the chat where they were saying, how loud should I record? What should I be peaking at? Meaning what decibel level should I see the peak of my audio hit? The reason why I say record as hot as you can without clipping is because the primary problem that you will run into in these home studio setups is noise in the background. And what I want you to think about is, let's say I'm talking at this level here, and around me, there's going to be some level of ambient noise. If I have a mic in front of me and it's picking me up at a low level, when I try and go to increase the volume of my voice, guess what's coming up right alongside of it? That noise as well. So in order to minimize that, you want to record your voice as hot as possible without clipping, but still maintaining the dynamic range of your full fortissimo or going full pianissimo. You want to maintain that same dynamic range, but as hot as you can or as loud as you can, so that you don't have to worry about that noise coming up and down as you're dealing with that. And so hopefully that makes some intuitive sense there. So now that you see that I have everything lined up, this is just a quick 30-second like snippet of it. And the reason why we recorded everybody as hot as possible is you'll see here in these track fader settings, I have everything set to -10. In my opinion, do this, please, because this is what we call gain staging. This means that at this point that you are beginning the mix or the editing process, this means that every single track is coming in at -10, which means that nothing is going to clip. If I play all of these at the same time, and you keep an eye on my master here, this master fader, you see we never hit red, we never exceed 0, because when you go from digital to analog, right? When you have something on your phone and you play analog, there's nothing above 0. You're gonna get distortion. So never, ever, ever clip unless that's an intentional sound that you are going for. With me so far? Apurva, any questions in the chat about anything?
No, I'm just going through and like throwing in little notes and definitions as we go along.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. Thank you, man. So now you have all the tracks, and what I would encourage you to do for your audition video is encourage all of your members to just give the best performance that they can give. All that stuff that Akhil showed you about, setting up the notes so they hit at the right time, setting up the pitch so it's correct and everything, that's awesome. That's going to elevate your track. But I would say even for audition video, just focus on getting the best performance for everybody. So just with a couple of tweaks, you are ready to submit that audition video. It's going to sound great. And what I would recommend is once you have all your tracks set up here, there's only a couple plugins that I would recommend that you put in, or effects, whatever you want to call it. The first is, as Akhil mentioned, was a gate. So that noise gate is going to be critical, and you're going to put that on every single person's track. You see the gate is operating here. You see that this is where that noise floor is. I'm dropping the threshold. All that threshold means is that once the noise exceeds a certain threshold, that's the only time that the gate is going to open and let sound through. I think that's the most intuitive way to think about it. So I have lowered the threshold of that gate. So now only when somebody is actually singing, we're going to come through with the audio. So you see that happening there. So that's the first thing that I would recommend putting on every single track. The next thing to make things easier is don't even worry about manually tuning because it's going to make things, I do it by all means. If you would like to, you're going to elevate yourself. It's going to sound awesome. I would recommend finding a free auto-tune plugin. This is called M-Auto Pitch. And all you're going to do is you're going to drag it in here. There's two settings on every auto-tune plugin that you're going to see, depth and speed. Depth means how much of that auto-tune sound is going to come through, and speed is how fast the plugin is going to react to changes that happen in the pitch. I will just, for arbitrary purposes, set this at 40. Feel free to mess with that if you want, and you'll hear the difference right here on the soprano again. Versus. So there's very, very minor changes happening there because that soprano sang pretty in key for that part. All right, so now we have done the gate. We have done the little bit of tuning. I'm going to say for your audition video, don't even worry about de-essing because a lot of these DAWs will not have a stock de-esser or it's maybe not good. So I know that de-essing is an integral part of it, but I think for the purpose of audition video, I think there's intentions to do some advanced sessions like this later on. We will cover that in more detail there, so it makes sense. But as it was explained earlier, all a de-esser is doing is sibilance frequencies are very harsh, especially when they come through in a recorded setting. We're just trying to dampen those. So I'm not going to show that there for sake of time, but something you can do if you want to, but it's not going to make or break your audition video. It's still going to sound great. So here we have the gate and we have the auto tune set up for this soprano. And I am just going to copy this and put it on every single person's thing. And just for the sake so you can hear the difference, here's this part where nobody has any gating done, nobody has any auto tuning done. So it's fine. This is like probably what you would get in a live sense. All we're doing is just slightly tuning things up a little bit, cleaning things up here. I'm going to copy this exact effect chain, drop it on every single one of these. Because then at this point, I want you to forget about the fact that you have individual tracks and just focus on thinking about it in terms of the parts, right? Like, oh, I want tenors to be louder here, or I think the whole background needs to be softer here. That type of mentality. Won't even go into bass stuff. I think for audition video, overkill in terms of octavization and everything. We're going to do this very simply. Don't put auto-tune on beatbox, obviously. That's going to sound kind of whack. All right, so now we have set up, need it on my solo as well. And so now just with that, I think it's been less than 10 minutes. This is what you're left with. This is solid. All we need to do is what I can hear just coming through the laptop speakers is I'm going to come here to my main background parts, making another group or a track stack, and I'm going to call this background vox. And all I'm going to do to the background vox is we're just going to drop them by like -6 dB so that those soloists can come through a little bit more. Now let's think like a music director, right? Think about how you would conduct your group. I'm feeling like the sops in general just came through a little bit too loud. I'm gonna drop them specifically right here, looking at my sopranos, maybe minus 2. So the last thing that we're going to do, I don't want to get too technical, but this will help you out a lot. The number one thing that freezes up audio software is when you try and put the same plugin doing the exact same thing on every single track. Do not do that unless you're doing something like gating or pitch correction where it needs to be on every single track. The technique that I'm talking about is called a send or a return. And what I want you to think about it is that when you are singing into a hall, let's say, when you're singing into a hall, your voice is coming out and interacting with that environment. What I want you to think about is that if you're singing in an a cappella group, all of you are singing in the same environment, if you were to all be in the same place. So that means you only need one reverb effect happening, but you want everybody's signal to go into that one reverb bus. And so I'm going to use that term bus because every signal will go into a singular bus, group, stack, whatever you want to call it. It's all going to go to one place. That means there's one plugin running. You don't have to worry about anything else. So in Ableton, the way that you do that is I'm creating a return track. It's called a return track because you are sending a vocal and it needs to return somewhere, right? So on this return bus, we're going to throw just a standard long haul type reverb.
I just want to mention, if possible, that like it's really important if you're adding a reverb that you do this, the bus or send or whatever it's called in different software, because if you add a reverb to a track and then you put that same track through a send and then add another reverb, a reverb compounded on a reverb can make things sound very messy very quickly.
Facts. Facts. So here we have that large hall reverb set up. And now this is what I'm going to do. Again, this is what we have at first. I'm now going to send a portion of the signal, or all of it. Let's start with all of it, just so it's clear. So when I have set this to 0, that means that 100% of the signal is also going into that reverb plugin. Let's not even use the term bus there, because there's only a reverb set on it right now. 100% going to it. So now your soloist sounds like this.
There's no way that I'm going there.
I will tell you right now, that's probably a little bit too much, because you're going to have everybody singing into that environment, right? So we're going to drop that to like -10, which just means that rather than 100% of the signal going through, it's going to be a little bit less than that. And I'm going to do that to this harmony vocal as well. And I'm going to do it to this whole background Vox stack as well. So really, I can put it on my bass a little bit as well if I want. And beatbox also, why not? So now we're left with something that sounds like this. Think about it. You were able to take all of your tracks, you've put them in. This maybe took 15 minutes. It's going to take a little bit longer in terms of having to do the organization. But once you get quick with keyboard shortcuts and different things like that, you will be able to do exactly what I just did here in no time at all. You're going to sound great for your audition video. And now you will have the foundational skills necessary to take advantage of other techniques that you learn either through these sessions, in your own, research, when you go online, looking stuff up on Google, looking stuff up on YouTube, to just make an even better sound. So was that clear? I hope it was clear. I think we went fast, but I think that this is a super easy way to get something that will sound great for your audition video. No, I still can't see the chat, so somebody just holler at me.
That was great stuff, man.
Oh, thank you, man.
Yeah, I think it went well. I think a lot of the questions were answered by Apurva. If anyone has, I don't see anything that wasn't answered, but let me know.
If there are any outstanding questions, I think we're about to jump into Q&A.
The other thing I want to say real fast is when it comes to beatbox, my recommendation would be is if you can, I think this will speed up the process. Also have your beatboxer record multiple takes where you're going to have them do their things like cymbal rolls or like swishes or different things like that. Have them do that on a separate take, because you want to be able to have different type of control on that rather than just the normal, kicks, hi-hat, snares that you would do. And there was another question I think earlier in the chat that I had answered, but just to clarify, I recommend recording multiple takes of beatbox specifically for the hi-hats and snares as well, because if you also split that off, hard L, hard R, you're going to get a really nice, solid, wide beatbox sound as well, but that kick is going to come right through the middle. And then any supplemental snares or swishes and things like that, it's up to your discretion, whether you want to push them wide, you want it to be dead center. I think that just gives you a little bit more flexibility and improves the overall quality of that product that you're making.
Yeah, I'll second that. Definitely get a bunch of takes of your beatbox sound. It really helps if you can like switch out a snare here and there, switch out a hi-hat, if you have all those samples all ready to go.
I think we're basically in our Q&A section now. So if you guys want to put your questions in the chat or just speak up, go for it.
Speaking up would be great because we've only heard from ourselves for the last hour.
All right, so if we have no questions, then, okay, Shaunak, do you use hair products?
100%, that's that pomade.
I got a quick question real quick.
Amazing.
Yeah, go for it, please. Yeah, we can hear you.
Oh, sorry. Yeah,
go ahead.
so our beatboxer actually like he's not like near with us. So like, do you have any tips on like recording beatboxers like on an iPhone mic
Tough.
or like people in general?
I have one tip for recording beatbox on an iPhone is if you're really going to do that, make sure that you do not beatbox directly like into the mic. What I like to do is hold it off to the side so that the air is coming out like parallel to the phone. That way, when you do like the very airy noises, you don't hear like a sudden like burst of noise that kind of messes up the signal, because an iPhone, it doesn't have a built-in pop filter or anything like that.
I would also recommend not using the voice memos app. So GarageBand is actually free on iPhone. You could probably use that and then export the GarageBand file. So record it in GarageBand, export that GarageBand file so you can use it on your Mac. Open it up on your Mac so you can get the raw track itself. So you can process that however you want. Because if you use voice memos, it's going to have its own compression. It's going to do its own thing with the audio. You want to have more control over how you process your beatboxing. So maybe that's a good way to do that.
All right, thank you.
And also,
oh, go ahead, sorry.
No, I was gonna say, I'm assuming the 43 people that are in here are like super into this stuff. So I'll just get a little bit technical with it. What generally happens with beatbox mixing is you also just sample one kick, a really good kick that your beatboxer does. And that is what is looped across at every single point that a kick happens, so that you can individually compress that really hard, get a really nice crack of that transient. So it sounds a little bit more artificial, but that's gonna help carry the record more. There's a question about K-snare mixing. Same thing, K-snare mixing, when we do it, like as humans, we don't get a quick enough transient on it, which means that it's not gonna crack as hard as we need it. So doing things like just doing a high shelf on that K-snare itself to help that come through a little bit more, do some like hard compression on it, or do some transient control on it to get it to crack more. And then in terms of spreading it wide or keeping it center, definitely up to you in terms of what stylistically you want to do.
So one additional thing I just thought if you want to touch on additional tips for specifically recording with phones. I think that was a bit early in the chat. There's some concern that a lot of team members might not have access to or ability to record on a good, compressor mic. So just if there's any tips to share for phone recording.
Something I would recommend is if you have just like a bass audio software thing happening in your computer, record yourself and then pull in that audio and play it back for yourself, like in the computer, and see how it sounds. Look at the waveform. If you see stuff that's clipping, or you see stuff that looks weird, or you see there's a lot of noise, accordingly adjust yourself. And we kind of do this iterative process with yourself to see how you yourself can best maximize the device that you have. Because at the end of the day, a good arrangement is going to be a good arrangement. A good performance is going to be a good performance. All these things like mics, all these mixing techniques, all of these things are meant to enhance it. So don't have a block in your mind creatively like, oh, like none of us have mics, like we're not going to be able to sound our best. I promise you that if you are a talented beatboxer, soloist, background, harmony, whatever it is, it's going to come through. And your judges, I'm sure ASA has done a great job of selecting people who can actually, pick up on that and not get skewed too much by, oh yeah, they mixed that super well.
Yeah, nothing can replace a really good take with a lot of emotion and feel. Yeah.
I see there's an ASA question about some beatbox soloist stuff.
Yeah, why don't we answer the question about optimizing the bass part? I'll get back to that question in just a minute.
Yeah, for sure. So for octavizing bass, there's two things that typically are done. You either octavize the bass, you have them record multiple takes. One of them, you're gonna drop down, EQ, compress accordingly to get a subby sound. Personally, what I do, maybe it's a little bit avant-garde, but I just use a MIDI, because ultimately, if this is going to be a recorded product, you have a little bit more creative flexibility. Use the MIDI for the bass and throw on a sub bass instrument on it, and then tweak to your liking, and then high pass your bass out so that you just get the essence of that bass vocalist's voice, and then you have that sub bass sitting really nice in that pocket that you've created with the high pass, and you're going to get a really nice sound.
I would like to plus one that, because even when I do like octavize the bass by dropping another take all the way down, I EQ it to the point of it sounding like a MIDI anyway. So with that, you kind of have a bit more control.
We have another question about physically orienting yourself when recording with phones. I think Apurva mentioned for beatboxing, you want to hold it to the side, but other recording positional recommendations.
Record maybe like a foot away. Of course, as Shaunak said, try to adjust that as you feel necessary, like pull it into your DAW and see if there's clipping or anything. But also just like consider the room that you're in. So if you're in a room with a lot of reflective surfaces, that might not be as good. And you want like a lot of like soft surface, like a bed, a big huge bed absorbs a lot of sound, and that'll reduce a lot of the retake. One thing that you could do is hide in a closet and record from there. And that could also be good for your echo. One problem that we had recording stuff virtually is people would record in like the most echoey of rooms and it just wouldn't sound as good. Yeah, you definitely want to keep that in mind and make people re-record if they have to. But that's important, especially if you're putting more reverb, like a reverb plugin on the thing. You're gonna have like, it's just gonna be a huge mess. You want the most clean of signals as possible, so you can you can go to town on the production side.
I think closets are great because you also have clothes that, you know, absorb a lot of the sound. So if you have a clothes closet, highly recommend.
The most
Absolutely.
part. Don't go into an empty closet because it's still gonna echo in the new clothes.
I just have one kind of less technical question. But what are kind of the most essential like guidelines or instructions that you would give to your group members about remote recording?
Yeah, you need some clothes in there.
I've written like whole detailed documents and I feel like that stuff just goes over people's heads. So how can you kind of like effectively hit the key points?
Let me ask a question to your question. What do you think are you having the most difficulty getting across to your members?
I think especially like recording environment, like sometimes people just don't have access to, for example, like a carpeted space or even just, I guess like we were just talking about closets, and they, even when they're recording from their phone, like the distance that they're keeping from their phone like really matters, and they don't really know how to listen for that kind of stuff, and also how to self-evaluate their recordings and do multiple takes. And like remotely, since I'm not there to monitor it, or other people with more experience aren't there to monitor it, like I guess I don't know how to get the best takes out of people necessarily.
I think another option for recording is maybe recording in your car. It's a pretty like damp environment for sound, so I think maybe you could try that. I haven't tried. You could try that.
For sure in the car.
Yeah, I think one thing I would say in terms of like kind of communicating with group members, I think it'd be good to, as part of your practice time or whenever you are all, I'm assuming remotely on a Zoom call, is to try to have like some time set aside to like you show yourself kind of like what you're doing, and have them try to on the call itself, like while you're in practice, quote unquote, like try to mirror or like, you know, find a good place and try practicing sitting in a particular position with like a, you know, with their phone or the mic in that orientation. And while it might seem like it's taking away from time, like learning the music potentially, I think like having you or someone else who is experienced or understands on the call with them, I think that's probably the best way for them to like immediately get feedback about, oh, this is not a good way to do it, or you want to have your phone here, et cetera, et cetera. And yeah, unfortunately, like that, I think that's that's a difficulty that we have to kind of deal with not being in person and guiding members directly. But I think it's valuable to set aside some time in practice to talk through this and have it, actively spend time figuring out your best orientation. Awesome. Yeah. So I know we're a bit over 5 Pacific, 8 Eastern on the call. So any more questions as they're coming in, please feel free to unmute or chat. Once again, to reiterate, this whole recording will be posted and shared with all the team captains and everyone who's interested. So all these panelists' wonderful knowledge will definitely be shared.
A quick question, Sarah.
Yes.
How specifically, like, are you saying this is going to be shared on like the website or something?
Yeah, so we'll figure out the exact way to disperse it, but we'll definitely, basically, essentially anyone who's interested in recording remotely will be able to access this. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
I think this is a question for Sarang. Is the double vocals allowed for a single member from ASA?
Yeah, so again, I think I mentioned in an answer above, but basically all the ASA like competition requirements and guidelines will be released officially in the coming week. So kind of stay tuned for the exact wording on that. But basically, the approach is that only active members should be singing and performing audio for your videos, right? So that's kind of the main requirement. So as long as it is active members that you're recording, the double taking shouldn't be an issue, because especially as has been discussed by I think every panelist here, that is a very valuable asset to making your video sound complete and provide that width.
And like, don't hesitate to get creative. Maybe like you need somebody to sing a soprano part and an alto part to like, further thicken out the sound or whatever it may be. That's all like, that's a really cool aspect of going virtual with this, because you have a lot more flexibility with what you want your sound to be.
All right, I think that most of our music questions are over, so I'm going to hand it off to Sarang to talk about more details about video requirements and details for the season.
Yeah, so I kind of included that in my answer to the previous question, but I guess I'll just again to reiterate, we'll be releasing this to all the team captains. So once again, if any of you are not on the ASA Slack workspace, please go to desiacapella.org/Slack, that's SLACK, which will allow you to join the workspace and get updates on any information that we're sharing. And of course, we'll also be sharing through our social media and our website as well. But we hope that this workshop was beneficial to you, and we'll definitely be, again, the further details about the again, audition and performance video guidelines will be released set in stone in the next week or so. But yeah, I think that's it for me. Singha, if you want to wrap it up.
Awesome. Thank you so much to the panelists for taking the time out to do this. This was definitely amazing, very helpful. We hope to do more workshops in the future that go more in depth. So definitely anyone who's interested, keep an eye out for when those are happening. And that's all for today. I hope you guys have a great week and good luck with recording your stuff.
Thank you all for coming.